All right, so hey, we're here with Shannon Terry. Just met him. Always been a big fan of you, Shannon, and what you've built. And of course, founder, owner, On3. Same thing, 247Sports, Rivals. You are truly I'm not trying to kiss your ass here, but you're a pioneer in this landscape. So I can't thank you enough for coming in here.
Hey, I'm glad to be here. It's been too long.
Yeah.
I've been a big fan of your social media accounts. It's one I go to. It's, I think I even tweeted that like a few months ago. It's one of the 4 or 5 that that I favorite, I look at. You do a great job. So
well, I appreciate
honored to be here.
Yeah, and it's so weird because I've never paid you. I'll pay you when we're done here for those kind words, but we've never worked together. So
Nope.
So I mean, like I said, that is truly something that I don't take light. When I get words of encouragement from you and Paul Feinbaum, people like that I've had. So
You have a great
I put you in
account.
that class, But before we get, I've never had a combative interview, but
Let's do it.
I got a real problem with you.
Let's hit it.
I don't understand.
Yeah.
It's my understanding you are an Alabama fan
Yeah.
and a Tennessee fan.
Yeah.
How in the hell does that happen?
Well, I mean, first of all, I'm not a huge sports fan in general. Okay. So I love Big Ten, SEC football, then Big Ten. I watch college football. I will occasionally watch college basketball. Not a huge fan of it. And I love going to NBA games. No interest in NFL or other sports. It's just I'm not a huge sports fan.
Okay.
Ironically.
But you played basketball, right?
Played college basketball.
Yeah.
I grew up going to Alabama games. I grew up in North Alabama, and I went to Alabama games during the golden era. It was amazing. I hitched rides with my high school basketball coach. I never actually went to a game with my parents. And the pageantry, the passion. It was just growing up in small town Alabama. It was the identity of the school, even though if you didn't went there or not, it meant so much to people, and you could see it, and I loved it. Grew up liking Alabama fans. It was the Bear Bryant era, and kind of picked. A lot of my family actually went to Auburn, but I grew up an Alabama fan, no question about it. Unbelievable respect for Tennessee. My parents tell me I'm very closely related to Philip Fulmer.
Oh, really?
On my mom's side, and so, and then during the years of starting Rivals and stuff, Tennessee was they were rolling. They were recruiting. They were owning Atlanta, and they were dipping in Alabama and South Carolina. Got to know Coach Fulmer a little bit, but a lot of respect for the Tennessee program. And then over the last year or so, I've gotten to know Coach Heupel pretty well. He's just an amazing man and stuff. But generally speaking, I get accused of a lot of things, and I'll stop the ramble here. I respect more than I am a fan. Now, I will cheer for Alabama and make no mistakes about it. I am probably least connected at Alabama than I am any program in the United States, to be honest. The irony is I've been to 3 college games in the last 10 years. I don't really talk to anyone at Alabama much. I talk to almost everyone at every other school. But it'll be interesting to see what the next few years. I've got a young set of kids. If they end up going to a school that's my first kids went to liberal arts and smaller schools. If these 2 little guys go somewhere else, who knows? I'm game. I didn't go there, so I'm game.
All right. Well, hey, whenever I get someone in here, I love to talk about their journey.
Yeah.
So how did you have the foresight, or did you have any indication that Rivals and the recruiting and all that would blow up the way it did?
Not really. Look, I was a massive SEC football fan. Went to games, watched it like college football, as I just mentioned. I go off to Lipscomb, NAI at school at the time, and we did shoot-arounds in the morning. We got on a Greyhound bus and went to games on Saturday. And for like 4 or 5 years, I became unbelievably disconnected. I don't even know how many games, the 5 years I was at Lipscomb, because, I'm 53. We didn't have TVs in our dorm. TV in the lobby didn't work. I didn't see games. And when I got out of Lipscomb, at that point in time, I was subscribing to the Tuscaloosa News, and I was listening to 1510, Bob Bell, Bill King. I was doing everything I could to connect, to that SEC culture that I actually thought I would be involved in some way. And a buddy of mine, we were transitioning and didn't know, we were young. We didn't have a freaking clue what we're going to do in life. He didn't like working at FedEx. He was an engineer. And I met him at this Italian restaurant in Cool Springs. I said, Greg, I got an idea on a thing I think will make us a little money and we'll like doing. And I'm like, you got 30 grand? I got 30 grand in my name. Let's do this. And then we napkined out this dynamic database written content management system. And to make a long story short, when you go post on Twitter, you take it for granted. But, 30 years ago, or I guess at this time, 25 years ago, you go make a post, it writes to the database, and then it publishes automatically. Those things didn't exist. I said, can we build this content management system? Can we make it permission based? And so we put 60 grand and we built a permission based content management system. And from there, we went out and got a bunch of subcontractors and started publishing SEC, Texas, and Texas A&M, which at the time they weren't in the SEC. Mm-hmm. Updates and stories and mostly recruiting. And then it just kind of worked. And it worked from the minute we started, and it worked all through Rivals, and 27 years later I'm still doing it.
And before that, had anyone done anything like that? Because
No.
My understanding was, and this was well before my time, but kind of the first updates were like 900 numbers.
Yeah.
And for people that don't, that's probably some of the audience, what the heck are they talking about? You had to dial a number and they would charge you per minute, I think it was, or something like that. And they'd probably talk really slow, and then they gave you recruiting updates. So
newspapers, these print magazines, which were big subscription things in these markets, and I remember, I think it was Webcrawler. A buddy came over and said, "Have you seen this new search engine?" And I'm like, "What are you talking about?" And he goes, because at that time I was a bulletin board member and a Prodigy guy, and he goes, "No, look at this Webcrawler, look at this thing." And I'm like, "This is the perfect distribution play for content." And then that kind of set off a series. And no, we were first, and and I think it's been good for me because I've worked in product. Like I help with the engineers. Mm-hmm. What's been good for me is that I'm willing to throw 5 things on the wall and run with the 1 or 2 that work and kill the 3 that don't. So working with me is high reward, high risk. Like if you're a part of something that's not working, no harm. We got to move on.
Right.
And if it's working, we go deeper. So
let me ask you this. So is my understanding, I don't know if I heard this or I read this or something, but I think you've covered teams before. You've covered recruiting.
Oh yeah, I've done it.
So you've done every aspect of it. That's another
28,000 miles in 1 year, driving to high school games or junior college games on a Thursday, high school on Friday, and covering college. So I've done it. Yeah. I've been the accountant. I've been the coder. I've done. I always say I'm not good at anything. I'm not great at anything. I'm pretty good at a lot of things. And so
I can relate.
during a window of time where you didn't have to be great at anything, you just had to be willing to take a risk and be able to do a bunch of different things. It worked, and it's been a good journey. And it's I'll say this too: the time we are in right now is the greatest era. I've been doing this for 27 years, contemplated retiring, but I could see this conflation of so many events in college sports, and this is the greatest time to be involved in college sports media, and it's so exciting. I can't sleep at night because of it.
And so obviously you sold that to Yahoo, right? Right? And then you start 247 Sports. Yeah. What can you share about, what was the behind the scenes of that?
Completely different business model. And, most people don't, they're just like, I actually did the opposite of what Rivals was. Rivals was a publisher-driven business with endemic .com fans, and that was it. And at the point that we sold Rivals, you could see the world was about to be a search and social world, which meant that 90% of audience didn't come from typing in basketweaving.com. It came from a search algorithm or a social platform. Mm-hmm. And that Rivals model didn't work in that. And so, because we talked about recapping it and getting new partners in and doing it over, and we talked to ESPN, they wanted to be a part of that. NBC wanted to be a part of it when they ultimately sold it. So when 24/7 came around, it was really actually the opposite of Rivals. It was a lot of J school grad young kids building around an algorithm. And for 10 years, that's what the internet was. And 24/7 from a financial perspective was unbelievably successful. It was the people that worked at 24/7, the publishers, the writers, the content creators, did infinitely better than the people at Rivals, because at that point in time, broadband, search, social internet was exploding. So, and then On3 is very different.
Yes,
than those things. Yeah.
So that's where you're at now. And I'm sure I've seen you answer this question, but I'm humor me for a minute. Why is On3 different? Are you just going to do the same thing once again? Build a company, sell it. What do you answer to people that ask you that?
So, I've been very transparent about it, and the more I say, the more they shake their head and they go, "We don't believe you." But, Rivals is a publisher endemic.com world, very echo-chambered, small. You knew it if you knew it. 24/7 didn't have the authenticity an ounce that Rivals had, but it had scale beyond belief. A completely different place, search and social. And at the time, there wasn't a lot of talent per se that Rivals had. 24/7 over time developed talent and people and stuff, and that's certainly not an issue today, and I'm not implying otherwise. On3 is a very different and unique beast. The first beast is I've never truly really built a national media arm. Like, both of those were kind of patchwork national plays. And so we've hired, very traditional back office around editorial, and we're building this national media arm. We're going deep in it. On the surface, that doesn't look very different than the fan site world or the work, but where it's truly completely different is that On3 at its core and at its DNA, and if you go to our meetings, we're building what we hope to be the LinkedIn for athletes. So we're building this incredibly comprehensive database that's forward-facing, that's media, that's public-facing. But we're also building an engine behind the scenes where all the athletes in the world can connect, can generate revenue opportunities through NIL, connect with other athletes, get tax advice, get deals, make money, get recruited, get educated, and all the things. And that's called the On3 Athlete Network. So everything that we're doing is really an apparatus to build the On3 Athlete Network, which has immeasurable potential.
Yeah, and that's so interesting because it seems like you're always viewing the overall landscape and pivoting to where things, not where they may be today, but where they'll be 5 years from now, 10 years from now. And I'll have to, I've never admitted this to anybody, but I saw, it was some kind of, you must have given like a presentation to your 247 Sports when you were there, and it was about, clickbait, that's where things are now, but trending more towards long form. Joe Rogan, 3-hour podcast. That's the number one podcast in the world. I started to see these things, and that's kind of when I knew I worked for a clickbait site. And I said, well, I got to get the hell out of here. Because if Shannon Terry says it's pivoting a different way, then I have confidence, and that's where things are going. So that's kind of interesting you always got to look towards people that are pioneering, I think, and learn from them. And I've tried to do that in a lot of different aspects. We just, off air, we were talking about Pat McAfee and his success. So I'm trying to do something a little bit like that. But also, I try not to model too much because I don't want to be a Josh Pate ripoff. But I know that's someone that
Josh
you brought on at 247 Sports, and he is just blown up. He's arguably the best. Well, like I'd say,
he's the best.
He and Kurt Herbstreit, and Paul Feinbaum, I feel like those are like the trio of college football media figures.
I hired Josh Pate. I think he was straight out of I don't know, shit, was he doing weather? I don't even know. But I saw him, and I saw it. Yeah. And then I talked to him one time, and it's like, there's no chance he's going to fail. And Josh Pate is the standard. And he does a terrific job. He does his work. He's knowledgeable. He's opinionated without being... the thing I admire most, like if you take all the people, like the reason Kirk Herbstreit is Kirk Herbstreit is that he can talk with you. Okay, he can sit down right now and like y'all are having a conversation and you feel better for it without, I didn't know that, but he didn't make me feel guilty about not knowing that.
Mm-hmm.
And Herb Street is the greatest I've ever seen, ever. He was the greatest in the history of media at sitting down right now. We're having a conversation. Oh yeah, by the way, the Super Bowl is going on right here, national championship game, but we're having, and Herb Street locks in with you. It's just you and him. Oh, and the national championship's happening. It's phenomenal. It is a gift. It is a talent that few have. Now, he's different in that respect. Where Pate is interesting, Pate is not that guy. He is very like, this is my opinion. You guys are idiots for not thinking this way. And he's all the things, but he does it without alienating you. He does it because he does his homework, and you look at him as he's authentic and he's speaking at you, but you're like, he's speaking at me. But no, I like him. He's right.
Mm-hmm.
And I think, Charles Barkley has a lot of those qualities. And I'm not comparing Pate to Charles Barkley, because Charles Barkley is, he has credit. He had credibility before he ever started.
Right.
They're very similar in a lot of ways. We've got a guy working for us right now at On3, JD Piquel.
Mm-hmm.
And I'll say this, he's every bit as good as Josh Pate, and he's probably more knowledgeable. And the thing that JD and Josh share that I love about both of them, they're the hardest working guys in the room. So like, I'm just sitting here and I just marvel at those guys. And I remember a day when I had that energy and I had that drive, and I don't know that I do or don't now, but it's like, and I feel like, how can I help you? And JD Piquel, my goodness, there's no telling what he's going to be in the end, because he's great human, works harder than anyone there, good looking guy, smart, he's articulate, he's got his own thing. So I'm just like, let's give you the platform, let's get behind you, and don't be afraid to make mistakes. And that's what I'd say to all young people in this business is, don't commit any of the capital sins, but outside of those things, mistakes are what are going to get you from A to Z quicker than anything.
Mm-hmm. Well, you referenced two people that you've hired on that have gone on to a lot of success. This may be a little bit of a broad question, but I can't imagine how many people over the years you have hired. What are some of the characteristics that you look for because I can't imagine you're making too many bad decisions, given all the success of the networks.
We had a great discussion with our leader. I have 9 people that report to me. We have about 220 people in our org at On3, and I don't have any attrition, and it's frustrating because it's the first business I ever have that every year I'm losing like 0.001% of my employees, which means that we're either hiring good or we're not manning up and getting rid of people that aren't where we need to be. And so we've looked at that. But if I'm looking at people to hire, the qualities that I'm looking for is I'm looking for good freaking humans, like people that respect one another, that come into a culture knowing they don't have things figured out, that they're not trying to be the biggest person in the room. I'm looking for people that have a discipline, I'm looking for people that I can do all these little things okay, but I'm really good at this one thing. And then you go, do we need that one thing? And then you're kind of irreplaceable. I'm looking for people that are consistent. I'm looking for people that don't have bad habits. Nashville is a hiring nightmare. We hire and we move people in, and they come to this town, and then it's downtown, and then it's 4:59 and I'm buzzing out, and the type. So so we're you kind of know when you do it. A lot of people try to impress you. That doesn't mean anything. It doesn't mean anything.
Well, I hope you're not speaking to me when you say that.
No, they talk about who they know or what they know. Here's the thing. Just show up and do your job. Just showing up every day and doing your job and a little more gets you more respect. And if you build a culture, which I've always had a culture, the peers determine, like who works and who doesn't work. When 8 out of 9 of my leadership team doesn't like a guy or a girl, it's a sign.
Yeah.
I don't even need to say anything.
Well, this is, to your point, this is not the industry that you can kind of come in and half-ass and have any type of success. I mean, you got to do nights, you got to do weekends, you got to be 365 if they need you, and some people are just not willing to do that.
That's what's pissed me off about On3, and everybody knows I've been on a warpath lately. Like, you don't get the credibility of 247 and Rivals coming into On3. We're a startup. How are we going to beat? I want On3 to be the next ESPN. All the things. I want it to be a multi-billion-dollar business that does all the things. Well, you're new here. You don't get the credit of Rivals and 247, and you can't work equal to those companies, and you can't work equal to ESPN or Fox or whatever. You got to do 2x them. And I really think, over the past year, I've been so pulled and trying to build like the strat plan and get the business going. And these last 30 days, I'm locked in. It's like, be careful. And your idea is 247 is an amazing company. Stanko's the best leader that's followed any company I've built by far. I like him. He does a good job. The guy that runs CBS News and CBS Sports, Jeff Kurtula, is one of the great stars in media. He was brilliantly smart, and so they're in great shape. The guy that bought Rivals is Jimmy Pitara, who's now head of ESPN. Right. So 247's got, those guys are in great shape. So if we're going to be equal to them, and we want to be way better than them, 247 is not a brand. It's a little division over here in CBS. We want to be the brand of college sports. Well, we need to be kicking their ass in all the ways. Yeah. And so I don't think that culture yet, and they're not our target by any means. And I don't think that culture yet has permeated through the org that we've built. We've only been doing this for like 16, 17 months. So we got a long way to go.
Well, it's clear you're a very competitive guy, but at the same time, and this is something we were talking about off air, you're not afraid to say, hey, this person's doing a great job. Hell, you just said CBS, this person, that person, great job. Whereas I've worked for places, and others have, where, you can't mention, you can't retweet. It's stupid. Oh, why in the hell have you, or why do you embrace that so much?
You got to recognize, you got to respect. My whole thing is, I don't care in media if I'm liked. I don't care if the NCAA likes me. I don't care if anyone at 247 or Rivals or ESPN. I want to be respected, and I want the people that work for me to be respected. Are in that same vein, when people that I'm competing with are doing great work, respect it. Adam Stanko is doing a phenomenal job at 247 Sports. And kudos to him. I've never even met him, but he's doing a really good job there. Jeff Kurtula building CBS Sports or 247 HQ, which has been an amazing platform for Josh Pate. They're doing great jobs. Now I can compete with them. Me respecting them and talking about them doesn't change the fact that I've got people over here that go maybe be better, and I'm okay with that. And so it's kind of the way I was raised, maybe. I don't know. It's fun. I think the key is this. 247 Rivals, and especially On3, they're not built with an end game in mind. They're built to be the best that they can be. And On3 is the first company I've built that can go all the way. The others had enormous limitations that, we could dig into. On3 does not have any. So it's got execution risk and all the things, but On3 can go all the way. It could be the next ESPN in sports.
Well, speaking of that, so I feel like you'd be the perfect person to ask where things are trending, and I think it's kind of clear based on On3's moves. NIL.
Yeah.
Is that the next thing that everyone needs to kind of be focused on, do you think?
I think the way I would answer that is this is the way they're trending. First of all, college sports is trending. Okay, so NFL's this beast. Now, what is NFL? Do we really even know? It's so much of it is just because of betting and gambling and whatever nationally. But college sports is trending. College sports is a train wreck right now. College football is a train wreck. Basketball, it will figure itself out.
And we still live in the Southeast where much of the states it's illegal to legally gamble,
Yeah.
and that's as time goes on, that's becoming more and more.
It's going to just
legalization.
College sports is a rocket ship. We're in the second inning of what this beast is going to be. Like it is. And so that's number one. So college sports, and so On3 is only college sports. And that is the space to be in sports. That's maybe the place to be in media. The second thing that's trending is athletes. You see me all the time, hashtag for the athlete. Okay. Athletes are the next thing. And I don't mean pro athletes. College athletes have a world of upside and opportunity and all the things that will change in that world. And the word is NIL, but NIL represents so much more than just name, image, likeness, and the ability for an athlete to earn a few dollars. What it is, it's an ability for an athlete to change the complete trajectory of their life and their future through knowledge, education, relationships, and experience. And that now is going to happen. And it is an awesome sight that's taking place. And the irony is it's going to make for better college players, more mature players, better games, and much more parity across the college sports landscape.
Could you see a time in the future where people invest in players NIL up
like
front?
Golf?
Yeah.
And sharing the
exactly.
Sure.
And get future earnings potential.
I hope athletes stay away from that. It's coming, and you'll see some contracts where it's like, hey, I'll give you $200,000 and get 10% of your contract going for 100%. It's coming, and athletes need to. The problem with college athletes, high school athletes, and look, we have a symposium elite series. We have 35, and heck, 25 of them are 5 stars coming to Nashville, and our whole speech to them is about getting your head right and playing the long game. It's about the unintended consequences of NIL, and it's not get away from the Dodge Chargers and all that stuff. You're on a higher scale now. Like, it's about playing chess, not checkers. Mm-hmm. And that's our message to these kids. Like these kids, just because you didn't have it, you're already the cool kid. You don't need those things to be the cool kid. Start playing the long game. Use that logo, that mark, your ability now to change the trajectory of your entire future by thinking the right way. And On3 wants to be a part of that.
And are we still in a landscape with NIL that it's hard to evaluate what these players are worth, or do you think we're already there?
No, it's we've got that nailed. That's easy. It's not even difficult. I was on the phone with a Power 5 collective this week and not spoken with them, and I thought we'd spoken to all of them. Mm-hmm. He goes, the CEO called and he said, hey, we wanted to get in touch with you. We'd run our models. You guys are at 6.4 million for your total collective value for our school. We're at 6.6. How'd you do it? It's not hard to figure out. Like, we've spent a year and a half building those models, and we are now at the point where we're getting all the data from the kids and all the data from the various schools and collectives. And so we extrapolate back. And I can tell you, I mean, all the numbers. The Rashada deal screwed everybody's mind up. The reality is there hasn't been that many bad actors in NIL. There's about an $85 million collective marketplace going on right now that are for existing roster. There's about $15 million that's for incoming freshmen. I see that number, and this is Power 5 football. I see that number doubling 25% a year over the next. But there is an efficient marketplace happening right now in college sports that will create more parity, more close competition, less chicanery than ever. And it's sad that the NCAA and all the people that are removed, that are there but want to be removed from the system, don't actually see what's going on.
Mm-hmm. And if you could even answer this, I don't know if it may be a difficult question, but what percentage do you think of SEC rosters have NIL deals?
Yeah, so we're trying to lead the charge on how that works, okay? And the way I would kind of sum it up is this. Let's say that there's 300 elite high school football prospects, and there's certainly a top 20, and then there's 100, and there's a 300. We think there's about 500 college players on a football roster that are also elite. You know, that's quarterback, offensive tackles are gold at levels unbelievable. Wide receivers and cornerbacks are becoming less valuable in a way there. So you take that group, that's a pretty simple scale. And then if you're in the too deep, there's pretty much a value for each of those schools. That value used to be school by school determined. But what we're seeing is for about 25 schools, the collective total is pretty similar. It's in this 5, 6.5, 7 million range. So being the second string offensive tackle on the too deep at one school is not a big difference between being at another school. So it's pretty easy to figure out. What you will notice, no one has said this, the transfer portal this year was unbelievably weak. Forget the numbers. The kids that were transferring there, trying to move on to a better opportunity or had no opportunity where they were. It was a very weak transfer portal. Almost impossible to rank, honestly. No tackles. I think there's one quarterback's got a really good chance. A couple, two are risk. Safety, couple receivers, and Hunter. Who knows what? He's an elite. Now, very, very weak group.
Do you think that's because most players got NIL deals to stay, right?
Yep.
Yeah.
Because because this whole cry of pay for play wasn't happening. By our data, 14% of collective dollars went to incoming recruits. Only 14%. 14%. Okay. Every collective I've spoken to says they want that number to be 10-ish%. We'll call it, some have said 12.5, some say 15. Let's just call it 10. Okay. So if you take a school XYZ and it has $10 million, which isn't the case, only $1 million is going to go in. So this concept of this infinite no salary cap's bullshit. Like every school in this roster value world has a finite number they are managing to. I can afford one elite defensive end, but I can't afford 3.
Right.
And my numbers are here. It's just it's common math. And I say it real simple to this. It will be an efficient marketplace, and it's happening. It may take it 2 more years, but it's happening. We don't need feds, to intervene, and we don't need the NCAA to actually do much.
Now, some of the blowback, I would imagine, and this is just speculation on my part, you would know better than I, but let's just use Tennessee as an example.
Yep.
When they beat Alabama, I have to imagine the NIL donations came in, whereas maybe the school didn't get quite what they were used to getting, and maybe not even calling out Tennessee, but across the board. Are you seeing that, and is that causing some issues?
I think there's general strife. This is a general statement. There's strife among athletic departments and ADs and heads of collectives. There's only so many dollars, okay, and so that is certainly happening.
Meanwhile, the television dollars, it's just skyrocketing.
And here's my other thing too. Stop with all the facility upgrades and all the bullshit. These kids have enough. We don't need full-time barbers and disco stations. Stop. Stop.
They were just spending money to spend it.
They're just spending money to spend it. And so at the end of the day, little Bubba here, maybe he'd rather have just $3,000 a month than like access to, I don't know. So I think at the end of the day, I think that the collectives and the schools have to work together, if not work in the same department, which obviously by rules can't happen at this stage.
Mm-hmm.
It has to go that way.
Yeah.
And those numbers, if you take aid and scholarships as a percentage of expense, right now it's 9% is the athlete wage of the total. Support staff, coaches, and coaches' severance is about 41%. So if the talent in name an industry in the world where the talent, the show, the person everyone's coming to see is garnering 9% of the talent wage, it's not fair. It's not right. And these, but conversely, it's only that way with about half the roster. Half the roster is getting actually probably more than they deserve through just, their student aid and all the relationships and all the perks of being a college athlete.
Now, I wanted to switch gears real quick and ask you about recruiting. And maybe you're not the right person to ask because you're running this operation that's central to it. But myself personally, maybe it's just because I'm getting older, but I find myself less interested in recruiting. And I think a lot of that has to do with signing day is insignificant. Now we got the 2, and it seems like 85-90% of the class is already put together come signing day. Is that an issue in your mind? Is there anything that
for sure
that if you could change things, would you change it?
I mean, I've heard some things about like, recruiting windows and periods of time and stuff that need to be changed, but no, I don't. I cover what we cover. Like I don't need recruiting to be sensationalized or popular like it was 20 years ago. To run a successful business, or nor do we want that. First of all, I think there's 2 things that have attributed to that. The first is the data and the accuracy of the scouting has really improved. 65% of the kids that are 5 stars get drafted. They're 14.2 times more likely to get drafted than a 3-star. And so the data pretty much empirically says that if you are a highly ranked blue chip, you are worthy of that. Now, there are some exceptions and there's some attitudes, but the industry that we've created along the way is doing a great job. And I'll tell you why it's doing a great job. And fans don't get this. And we have the best scout in the industry I've ever worked with in 30 years in Charles Power. And I'm not diminishing Charles. He's the best. He's the best. He is Michael Jordan of scouting. The next best person is here. And he runs our scouting operations. But the reason scouting is better is because schools are better. The schools have more money, more data, more science, more relationships, all the things. We are a repository of that information. We talk to every defensive back coach. And if 10 defensive back coach say XYZ is the best corner, he's our number 1. Mm-hmm. We look at it for validation, but that's not the real deal. The real deal is the schools. So that's a really big piece in this. The second thing is the expectation for the Ohio States, the Georgias, the Alabamas, Clemson for a period of time is that all we do is sign 5 stars and 4 stars. So what's another one? Mm-hmm. And so fans have been spoiled to the fact that we're going to get 4 or 5 stars a year. And it's been happening, and it's true.
Mm. How often does someone call you? I know you're not the one sitting here, this guy's a 4, this guy's a 5, but do people call you and say, what the hell? Why do you got player X as a 4? He should be a 5, or he's a 3-star. What the hell? This guy's clearly a 4.
We've heard it all. The biggest thing is the head coaches now and the assistant coaches calling about the NIL evaluations. Mm. And that's the big one. Because I'm not going to name his name, but the best, most talented, he's not a quarterback, college player last year walked in and said, "Hey, here's my evaluation, and I want this amount of money." Mm-hmm. And so we're dealing with that, but we have an open dialogue with the schools, the collectives, and the athletes. We are in no means trying to do anything but create an efficient marketplace and accurately communicate value to both parties. And I think we've done a good job of that. The average SEC roster value, which would be the collective driven side, so it takes out social influence. I got X TikTok followers and all the things. It's $20,000. But if you listen to the rhetoric, it's like every SEC player is making hundreds of thousands. It's not the case.
Right.
There are a few outliers. What do you think Arch Manning's value is really worth? If Arch Manning hires a team of marketing pros and starts calling national brands, he gets a deal. Bronny James, we value him at $7.2 million using all the data and science. And I go to our data science team and I go, we all know his numbers got to be double digits. It's way more than that.
Right.
But the numbers are good. The numbers are accurate. These athletes have a lot of value. I think that whole college football marketplace is about $250 million right now, which is the bulk of the place. I think NIL in general is probably no more than a third of $1 billion. It's not $1 billion like it's been reported, but it will grow 20, 35, 40% a year for a long time.
And you think NIL and transfer portal and all this is good for the game? I've heard you talk about it. It kind of spreads the talent a little bit more.
So the school can keep the players they want to keep by playing them and by developing them and by building great NIL programs around them. And then the other kids maybe need to look at other opportunities. So I really, and I'm not trying to be the guy that's a Pollyanna here, but I really believe that because of transfer portal and because of NIL and just general awareness and such, I think college football, now not college basketball because there's this whole NBA issue. College football is in the best position it's been in years, and I do believe that where we've had one or two team parity, like over the past decade, it was like Alabama and someone else. I think this next 10 years we're going to see that number, get closer to 5 or 6. Now, how does it get to what everybody really wants? 10 or 12, 10 or 20 schools. That's going to take more investment and a lot of things, but we're going to see more parity in the future.
Well, I know everyone was concerned, Alabama, Ohio State, Georgia, they would not only get the best recruits, but the best transfers. And to an extent that it's, they cherry pick who they like, but I think it has really helped teams like Tennessee, LSU.
Look at what Tennessee's doing. Where's Tennessee without NIL? Josh Heupel is a brilliant offensive mind. Spire is arguably the best collective in the space. Tennessee fan base support is, I don't even know how you rate it. It's all the things.
Yeah.
Without NIL, without transfer portal, without all those apparatus, I don't think Heupel has them, and they're going to be, they may lose more games this year. They're going to be really good this year.
Yeah.
And make no mistake about it, NIL is a massive player in that.
But considering it's so new, could you also look at like an A&M and say
they just messed it up?
They went sideways on them.
So A&M has the best collective opportunity through the 12th man of anyone. Their structure was a decade ahead of everyone. A&M's problem is while Jimbo Fisher is a phenomenal old school football mind coach, he is not a good CEO head coach. So A&M may get me in trouble here. He's not at all. The difference between the way a Nick Saban, Kirby Smart runs an organization versus a Jimbo Fisher are stratospheres apart. So now we go out and we go pay all these players through the 12th Man Foundation. We get these players in the school legally, all and up. Should have said we're doing what we're supposed to do here.
Right.
They're in a culture. They're first of all, they're young people. They've got good deals, and they're just not in a good culture, and it didn't work out.
Mm-hmm.
And so you got to have a great culture. You got to have great leadership, great players at the root. It needs to be a meritocracy around roster value, where the bulk of the money, and listen, all the schools and all the coaches are going that direction. So incoming freshmen, as I said, we project 14% of NIL going into this season. I bet that number in 2 years is single digits. And the beauty of it is, and I don't think people have thought about this that much, is that NIL and transfer portal are kind of counterbalances in a way, because you can't have roster continuity and roster security if you didn't have without transfer portal being there. Because if transfer portal wasn't there, you'd be paying all these recruits all this money and saying, roster, don't worry about it. You can't go anywhere. But now roster can leave.
Right.
So you got to take care of roster. And the NCAA had no clue thought this through. But the reality is transfer portal sitting here, NIL sitting here is the ultimate counterbalance to college sports. We are in a great state. And when I sit there and I listen to that hearing yesterday, sorry for my diatribe here, and I'm like, we can't let one event with Jason Rashada, and these anonymous sources at schools that are irrelevant, change the fact that we actually, for the first time, are starting toward an efficient marketplace that could lead to parity. That's the irony to it.
Mm-hmm.
But you know why the cry is loud? NCAA doesn't want to give that money up.
Right. Now, everything you're doing, do you think it'll help kind of prevent these middlemen in NIL from doing all these shenanigans?
Yeah, that's what we want to do. We want to bring education to everyone. We're not trying to charge the athlete for anything. We just want you to be aware. Like, if you're an athlete and you're leveraging schools, you're an idiot. Like, you're done. Like, if you're an athlete, your time at the university and your time as a potential pro is just a snapshot. You have to be playing chess, not checkers here. Mm-hmm. And I think because it's real practical money now, it's not this textbook, I think families and athletes through financial literacy will literally age a generation. So they're going to go to a tax class. They're going to go to a legal class. They're going to listen because I'm about to sign a deal for $5,000. I want to know. So it's beautiful. That's it's awesome. It's where we should have been 10 years ago.
Well, speaking of the future, I wanted to ask you too, Texas and Oklahoma coming into the SEC, what does that do to the SEC? What does that do to college landscape, do you think?
Well, it just gets us closer to one or two power conferences in my mind. I mean, when I think SEC, I don't think Texas A&M and Oklahoma and Texas. And so we're getting to that point, obviously, with there's one or two or three conferences that, make up, the haves and the haves not. So
right.
To me, that's what it is. And good for the SEC. And if I'm the Big Ten, I'm doing everything I can to kind of get some of those West Coast schools in Notre Dame. So.
All right, final thing for you, Shannon.
Yeah.
I really appreciate all your time. I've been asking everybody that comes in here that, we got media days coming up here in Nashville, first time ever. Anything you're hearing, they're going to do anything unique, or if not, what should they do, do you think, to get the most out of Nashville at an event like SEC Media Days? Because, when this town sets to do something, they crush it.
Yeah, it'll be all the things, it's a beautiful place to hold a party. And, I quit going to SEC Media Days about 7-8 years ago, and it's a hell of a boondoggle. So I don't know who we'll be sending here. I'm sure there'll be some people that will eke over here, but it's a great event, and it's a great opportunity. The media has been a phenomenal fixture in SEC sports over the years and played a key role, and I'm thankful to be a part of it. And it's a transitioning now. It's transitioning from the guys of, the old school editorial people to guys like you, and that's okay. There's a seat at the table for everybody.
Yeah, I was surprised they let us in last year. Hopefully they let us in this upcoming year.
Yeah, they better. You need to kill them on Twitter.